What is up, DMV Hoops fans? I'm Matt and I'm joined here by Melanie Page. Melanie, thank you for coming on. We're going to get into your docu-series here in a minute. But first of all, how are you doing?
I'm great. We just had a screening last night, so this is a perfect time to have this conversation because I'm just feeling all the good energy from it.
That's great. It went well. Everything went according to plan and everything.
And as well as it could. There's not much you can do once you press play on the
For
doc
sure.
and people are watching. So it's a great feeling.
That's great. That reaction was positive. Everybody was in a good mood after and everything.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, we call the screenings for the love, so
Sure.
it's all for the love of basketball.
That's awesome. And that's what we're here for. So I think this is perfect. And I'm glad some of our listeners put me on to what you're doing here because it seems like a great project. I'm planning to come next week's screening, so already looking forward to it. But we'll get into all the details here of why we're here in just a second. But first, we're brought to you by Stateside Vodka and their Surfside hard iced teas, hard lemonades, hard every flavor you can think of. They're all delicious. And Betonline, it's your number one source for all your betting needs. Get the latest odds and matchup reports for baseball, boxing, golf, UFC, tennis, everything. BetOnline continues to be the fastest and easiest way to place all your wagers, live betting, favorite casino and card games. Head to the website and use your mobile device to sign up today and use our promo code Bleav, BLEAV, for 50% off your welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, so Melanie, we buried the lead here a little bit. The documentary, or I guess docu-series, probably more accurate name for that, is Can't Retire From This. It's DMV focused. And there's been several other, DMV related documentaries for basketball over the last couple of years, but they didn't focus much, if at all, on the women's game in the water. I thought was great, but other than like 20 seconds of Marissa Coleman, I don't think there were any other female hoopers, featured on the doc. So did that play into that? Is that something you wanted to kind of bring, awareness of to the community, just how good women's basketball is in the area as well?
And that absolutely, I think you hit the nail on the head with that. Marissa Coleman, obviously, she's great. This is a shirt
There
that
you go.
this company, PG County, has made that has several of the PG County women's basketball legends on it. So had to rep them today. But yeah, absolutely. I think the history of women's basketball in general gets lost. So as we see right now, the population and the interest in women's basketball is on the rise as we watch the New York Liberty play the Aces the other day in the series, and we see those battles and conversations on Twitter taking over. And women's college hoops is absolutely exponentially on the rise right now. So I think right now where we're at in the history of women's sports is that the pioneers and their stories are getting lost. This generation of girls and women's basketball players are not the first to do what they're doing. I think that the conversations and the history need to be preserved. And for these women that are coming up right now and really spearheading the popularity of where this game is transcending to, they need to have somebody to look up to. So my origin story of this documentary or documentary series, I should say, is my mom is actually a high school age girls basketball coach in the DMV area. And I actually live in Los Angeles currently, but her basketball team is here in the DMV, obviously. But the pandemic hit and I came home. And in me coming home, I was able to spend a good amount of time chatting with and, masking up and going to the outdoor courts with my mom's basketball team and teaching them some things. And they're all looking up to me as some Hollywood producer, director, writer.
Sure.
Like, oh my gosh.
That's pretty
And
cool.
I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, but you guys are looking up to me, but you don't know who I looked up to, who inspired me. And so that was essentially the spark. And In the Water came out around that time. I saw the trailers. I was very excited to see it. And I was like, they only got Marissa Coleman in here. They don't have Rebecca Brunson. They don't have John Quell. They don't have this person. They don't have Diane Richardson. Like all these people that, I looked up to that were a part of my community and those that were really driving the DMV girls basketball scene. They need their own thing to be told. And Can't Retire From This is actually from the child's point of view. So there's an animation storyline. You'll be able to see that next week. And just seeing the child's point of view and how she is inspired by these women that are coming up and really setting the stage for what she can become and where basketball can take her in life.
Oh, that's so awesome. I think awareness of just how good the product is something for people that people are finally coming around to. You hear a lot of like over the blog I write for, Bulls Forever, we do a lot of Mystics coverage, and a lot of the commentary is, wow, this is better basketball than I thought. And it's sad that we're still doing that in 2023, but I think that's why documentaries like this are so important, because it, women's basketball has been good for a really long time. Like we're just being slow to catch up to it, and being able to point to all these pioneers of the game, I think is really awesome. And I'm sure they were happy to do that. I would imagine this was not a hard thing to get people to volunteer to participate in.
Yeah, I mean, we actually did 58
Wow.
interviews.
Okay.
So the pilot episode has roughly about 30 people in it in
Mhm.
total, but there's just so many stories, and it's unfortunate that all of them are not going to make it
Sure.
into the final cut. But I honestly feel like I'm the historian of DMV women's basketball right now, which was not the goal, but it's
Sure.
a product of what has happened.
Had this been kind of on your mind for a while prior to coming home from the pandemic? Was this like an idea that you've been tinkering around with, or just sort of, hey, I'm working with these girls, like this, that was at the origin of the idea, I guess?
That was the origin of the idea, but as a filmmaker, I've always been wanting to figure out how to put essentially my story and my roots into my work. You know,
Sure.
that's how any filmmaker, any
Mm.
storyteller is able to tell the best stories, is by telling their truth. So I put a lot of my truth into Can't Retire. I mean, fortunately, unfortunately, with the pandemic, the world shut down.
Mhm.
The whole business of filmmaking essentially shut down. So that gave me time, and time that I was not hustling around working
Right.
on other projects. Like I could really just sit. And I was here at my house where it's filled with trophies from myself, my brothers, like my mother, just like I'm back in my bedroom now.
Yeah.
Like,
That's
so
cool.
that was all just marinating on me. It was like, maybe this we got to turn this time period into a blessing in disguise, and that's what it's become.
I think that's great. For a lot of us, it was either, hey, like you stop doing anything at all, or hey, I'm going to use the best of it to focus on some stuff that I've wanted to get done or cross off my to-do list. And I'm glad that this was a positive outlet during obviously a tough time for everybody. But you mentioned some trophies there. So just for everybody who's not familiar, you are were a really good high school basketball player in the area here too. Unfortunately, had some injuries that prevented you from taking that further, but you're speaking from a point of experience. Like you have seen how good the women in this area are, and you can talk to that from a place of expertise. And I think that's where like the best kind of films come from, or when there are people that have lived that and can kind of breathe their experience into these things. So I guess, can you give folks a little bit about your background as a player? What kind of player, what position, all that kind of good stuff?
Yeah, I mean, and what's great about Can't Retire from this, and just this whole process, is I am surrounded by a team.
Mhm.
So as I transitioned into filmmaking, like I kept my point guard mentality.
There you go.
I'm passing the shot selection to my
Mhm.
shooters, and that's how we're able to capture. You get it to the editor. That's the rebounds. Getting all, so everything kind of is a parallel easy transition. And I think that's metaphorically what Can't Retire is. You take those life skills that you learn from the basketball court,
Mhm.
and you transition to whatever career path you want to go on. So my high school basketball career, 2010, we won a WCAC championship and a city title.
Which is
So
very tough to do for anyone not familiar. That's as good a league as there is in the country, which basically the world. So that's not that's a huge accomplishment, honestly.
yeah, so I mean, coming off that, like that was just like obviously the greatest feeling in the world at the time, and got to play with some really great players. Tiana Marshall, she was essentially our star player, played at Georgia Tech,
Mhm.
and got drafted into the WNBA. But even in that time period, playing against Lindsay Allen, who's currently on Minnesota Lynx, and she played at St. John's. Several of those St. John's players gave us some tremendous battles. You play against Lindsay Spann, who was a star player at Good Counsel, and she has gone on. Now she's coaching at University of Maryland. So, and there's several. At minimum 10, I want to say, Division I women's basketball coaches from my era of WCAC specific basketball that are coaching and really taking what they learned from the DMV, and they're all over the country, like teaching these next generation of women's basketball players, and they're shining on coaching staffs because there's limited opportunities to play professionally, so they're taking that knowledge. You have people like Monica McNutt and LaChina Robinson, who are faces and voices of analysts in women's basketball and broadcasters, so they're able to talk about it, but they learn that knowledge here.
And they're as good as anybody in the game at any level of talking about basketball. So I think that points to the experience and the breadth of knowledge of teaching and coaching in this area. So I'm glad that you've got that element too of who taught them the game. So did your experience playing help you make some of these connections and relationships that you could then leverage for, not leverage in a negative way, but like you have to know people to be able to get them to come to the documentary. And if they are familiar with you, I'm sure that makes that easier. And I know your mom's been a coach for a long time. So was that kind of an entryway into getting some of these people to hear you out and hear what the doc was going to be about and get them involved?
The whole inception actually started from a Facebook post that I made after watching In the Water, and I'm just sitting here in the house watching it. I'm like, wow, I want to tell stories too. So I was like, who wants to come along and let's do this? So actually a few of my former teammates, coaches, and just women's basketball pioneers in the area commented on that post or reached out and said, yeah, let's do it. Like, I'm down. I love this idea. So just from that motivation from the start was a good, starting point. And then obviously talking to my mom, who was watching the In the Water doc with me at the time. So she's thinking, and, we're bouncing ideas off of each other. And then our first interview was with Hank Lloyd, who is actually essentially my godfather. So I met him. I interviewed him. He was an assistant coach at Riverdale Baptist during their early 2000s years under Diane Richardson. So,
and they were power, right? Like that was the team.
Number one in the country consistently, but definitely number one in this area for a very, very long time. Riverdale was a school I was always afraid of. So Hank Lloyd was able to get us Diane Richardson, and she's the queen of the DMV. And Diane's interview became essentially kind of the core interview of what I was building this story off of. She is such a pioneer, a champion of just girls that look like me. I never got to play for her, but everybody that did play for her has done something phenomenal in the game of basketball or in life in general. And I just admire how she cares about her players. So I want to make sure that her story is told, because I think more people and more coaches need to be like her.
When you have somebody that's that influential figure and has touched that many other people too, I think getting her involved is probably like a really good jumping off point for all these other people. Like it instantly gives you credibility with like the quality of product you're going to put out here. So I'm sure that was a pivotal point in putting this together.
Absolutely. Once we put out, we've been putting together some social media content and dishing it out throughout the months. But sorry, there's
all good.
But we put together just a short little video, and that was essentially going DMV viral, I guess. And people were like, "What is this?" Like, yes, somebody's finally like talking to Coach Rich and telling her story as it should be told. So that was able to definitely help build up our credibility, and especially our social media. We've been putting together just different little clips about so many people that we've talked to, and I just want to make sure their stories are told and represented, and that helps put more eyes and voices to our power of fueling this.
That's so cool. How many episodes total are we ending up with here? I've seen a couple different things from 4 to 8. Where did we land at the end?
I know. As an ambitious person here, I initially, especially, we didn't know how long the world was going to be shut down. So I was like, we could do 8 20-minute episodes. And then it was like, yeah, this is getting exhausting.
Yeah, that's a lot of editing and post work that's got to be done for all of those, I'm sure.
The post-production situation has been whew, it's, you know, you have 58 interviews and every one of them is at least an hour long. So that could have been 8 at the time, but
Gotcha.
we kind of whittled it down, just also seeing how much like licensing footage and all this stuff cost.
Yeah, I gotcha.
And so we have reached a final point that we're down to 3 episodes right
Okay.
now, and that's going to be our solid core. Our first episode is about 35 minutes, so we'll keep it in that same time frame. It essentially will be about an hour and a half long documentary put
Mhm.
together.
And that's great. And you've got all that other footage that can inspire other things or be used or repurposed later. It doesn't mean that it just didn't make the first cut here. It doesn't mean that you can't do something with it. So I'm sure that's
Exactly.
exciting just to use this to get the idea started and then see where it can go from there too.
Exactly. Yes.
So you mentioned your background as a filmmaker out in LA, working in this industry. Can you talk a little bit about that background and that experience and how it kind of helped you, get prepared to do this kind of project?
Yeah. So I'll start a little bit from my beginning. So in college, I started my own production company called Major Motives, and in college, I was doing a lot of the radio interviews, filming some of my friends who
Mhm.
were interviewing our special guests that would come through. We started branching off and doing commercials for people that had like clothing brands on campus and etc. And then started doing music videos, eventually did a short film, a web series. And at the time, I was sending those videos to my middle school basketball coach, who I'm pretty close with. And unbeknownst to me, her first cousin was a director for ESPN Films. So she started telling him about me. And my senior year, he actually took me under his wing, and I was able to be a production assistant for one of his ESPN Films shorts called Redemption Song. And eventually, as an ambitious hard worker, I worked my way up to being an associate producer on that particular doc. And then he brought me along to help produce 2 or 3 other ESPN 30 for 30 SEC story documentaries. So straight out of college, like I just had this very unique learning experience that I was just learning how to tell sports stories
Mhm.
straight from the jump. And I already had that creative mind that I was already incepting in college. So as we jump into this can't retire world, that was how I was able to put it all together and really marinate on my creative narrative-ish storytelling bridge with sports and documentary. And yeah, that's how I've gotten here.
That's so cool. The 30 for 30 series as a whole, I think was like one of the great things of the last like 20 years in terms of
Yeah,
sports related content.
absolutely.
While I was at University of Maryland, I got to go to the premiere for Without Bias, the Len Bias documentary
Um,
that was on 30 for 30. And just being in the room with his family during that was like
yeah.
the most memorable thing I think I've done in a long time, just because it means so much to people when you can actually put their story on film for them, and then they get to see the reaction to it. I think it's pretty great. So I can't wait for everybody to see their piece of this and react to it too. Has everybody that participated in the doc or will make the final cut have they seen it yet, or are they attending these screenings? Or
Our first screening, we had a good amount of them come through. Namely, Diane Richardson was actually able to come to that one.
that's cool.
And so I'm standing on the sideline watching the crowd watch it
Yep,
because I've already seen it a
sure.
gazillion times. So I'm watching Coach Rich in the
Mhm.
front, and I see her sitting like this. I'm like, uh-oh, is she
Is it
crying?
really good or really bad? Yeah,
Yeah, but it was at a pretty sentimental point, I'd
that's
say.
awesome. That's
So
so good.
I like to say that I made Coach Rich cry, and she's not a crier at
Sure.
all. Like, she's straight to the point. She is hardcore,
Yep.
but yeah, like, and we gave her the mic to be able to just speak after the
That's
doc
cool.
showed and just express how she felt about it, and that was just honestly the best feeling in the world. Like that was exactly what I needed to just like continue to motivate me to get this project completed to the finish line. And just hearing the reactions of some of the other players that are in it, Kania Cole, Lynetta Kaiser,
Mhm.
just watching their reactions and how they've reached out to me. Lindsay Spann was actually there. So, and just seeing their faces and seeing them, and showing that people actually care about their stories.
Right.
After we did a couple of the interviews, a few people reached out to me, like, as the process of where we're collecting these stories, and they're like, wow, like, thank you, Melanie, like, I that was very therapeutic for me. I didn't think that anybody cared about my story, and
Hmm.
thank you for giving me the chance to just express and just talk freely about my experience in basketball, because I love it so much. And those moments just mean so much to me, because that's true. Like, how would anybody know if nobody's asking the question? So, yeah.
I think there's an appetite for that kind of coverage too, and I think that's what I hope people are slowly coming around to. I wish it were coming around to it more quickly, but it's people will listen to a good story, especially in this area. I think we're all really good about rallying around each other, and
Yeah.
the DMV community actually is a community. So when you can get the right stories told and tell the right people, they'll tell the right people, and hopefully that word of mouth like really helps this blow up. But uh, well, like, what's the distribution plan? Is that worked out yet? When can people see this? Where do we have any of that kind of sorted out yet? Or are we still in the early stages here for that?
Still working on that. That's why I'm having these screenings, really
Sure.
just like make sure like this story is
Tight.
accurate, and
Yeah.
having the same feelings and emotions that myself and my team feel making it.
I
So
got
all positive feedback so far. Now it's just being able to find that additional leverage of funding, so we
you.
can
Mhm.
finish episodes 2 and episodes 3, and then you know hopefully, some of these conversations and people talking about it, you get to somebody that has a distribution deal, or, something of that sort, that this can live somewhere, because I want it to be accessible to all young girls or all young people, or people. And it's a family story. So fathers need to watch it so they can help, you know, propel their daughters to their careers, whether it's through basketball or not. But just showing support in
Mhm.
general, just for young girls, is so important to me.
I mean, it's just good for the game in general to have that the spotlight shown on the women's game as well. I mean, how many of these people in this documentary are mothers of people that also played basketball too? So their sons and things like that are getting coverage that, but we don't really know where their understanding and knowledge of the game came from. And so I think
Absolutely.
that's super important to have that next generation of people come up with a full, complete understanding of how good the history is here. But also, I'm imagining that this is a story that applies to any young girl playing basketball anywhere. It doesn't have to just be the
Yes.
DMV, and there's not really anything else comparable to that that I'm aware of. So that'd be great
Yeah.
for everybody to have access to.
Absolutely. And the goal is to really franchise this. Like,
Yeah.
I can't tell the Atlanta story, but I can find the version of me in Atlanta to help guide them to tell this story.
Mm-hmm.
New York, Los Angeles, like the goal, the ultimate higher vision is to be able to franchise this until Can't retire from this in all the WNBA markets, ideally.
Sure.
But, you have places like Tennessee who don't have WNBA teams yet.
Yeah.
North Carolina, that's, these are basketball states, and they have communities that really rally behind women's basketball, and where, we need to know those stories and how people started to come together to tell those stories, or tell, propel women's basketball in those areas. So that's the goal for me. Exactly what you said. It's a universal thing.
I think this is like the ideal test market and jumping off point because I think we get it here, right? Like it's not Connecticut where maybe, like, but still like the DMV as a whole, I think understands just how good the women's game is. Honestly, the most electric atmosphere I went to in any Maryland basketball game while I was there was a Maryland UNC women's game. And I didn't expect that going in to be as full as it was. And I ended up having to sit literally in the top row of the stadium, showing up an hour before the game because it was that packed and that wild. And I think people really got into it, and hopefully that can help build the next generation of people going to these games and turning out like that. I guess what is your ideal target audience? Like if this really reaches, one demographic specifically, like who do you really want that to hit home with?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, women that look like me, Black women, I don't think our stories really get told. And even told responsibly in the sports space, and that's, or even in general in media. I think it's kind of tough. We kind of get the lower end of the stick. So this is definitely absolutely something to uplift Black women, but women in general, I think, need to see this and just show that there is support. Like, people care about women's stories just from a human level, like, and just a love story. So
That's cool.
ultimately, that is my target. Wherever women and Black women can be and be inspired by it, that will be it for me.
You said a pretty key word there, responsible, right? Or do it
Yeah.
responsibly. Is that really stressful while you're going through this, knowing that like all these important people, this is their opportunity to have their story represented? Like that's got to be a big weight on your shoulders throughout.
Yes, yes, very much so. But I mean, fortunately, like, I am of this world, and
Sure.
I when I watch things, like, I always look at IMDb, I always look at articles and read
Mhm.
articles or Twitter, and just I want to know the story and who's behind it, and there's so many stories that are told by about Black women that are not from Black
Yeah.
women. So, um, but there are some that are told really well, like the New York Times had a documentary that actually won an Oscar last year. So. Lucia Harris, who she was the first woman that was drafted to the NBA. So that was a fantastic story,
Mhm.
but there need to be more of those, and it'll be, I feel like, an even better deal if it were by somebody that looks like me that's telling that story. So it's a hit or miss, sometimes, and that is difficult because I can't be the only one,
Sure.
and it's frustrating. But the people that have rallied around me, like, I've been teaching them what I've learned from my mentors and my learning experience outside of the DMV area, and just feeding into them and giving them opportunities to be able to either work with me or just throwing them the lob for other jobs that they've learned something from me, and I'm investing my time into my crew and my teammates in this world. Like, they get that extra leverage. So ultimately, I am building more of me in this
Mhm.
space as well, and that's been the greatest feeling as well.
So a lot of the team that worked on this also from the DMV area as well.
Yeah, so my production team is DMV based, and then my
Okay.
editing team
Sure.
is LA based. But yeah, throughout this process, and as the pandemic and the world started opening back up, my team has shifted and changed because
Sure.
everybody has to go back to their regular jobs and things.
Yeah.
So that was pretty difficult times. But yeah, Ryan Gordon, who formerly went as Free Alexander on the socials. He
Mhm.
was heavily into doing videography for basketball players in general in the area, and he's one of the first people that reached out to me. And
That's
so the
cool.
first year of stories were through me and him, and he had those connections, was able to get us Tierra Ruffin Pratt, Chrissy Winter Scott,
Mhm.
um, Lynetta Kaiser, like a bunch of players were through him because he had already been working with them and he
Gotcha.
was already invested in their stories. So it's partners like that that just
Mhm.
kind of rose from the concrete and just like, yeah, let's partner up. Like, I have the knowledge to be able to do this. You have the knowledge for that. Let's put it together, and that really was able to help launch this in the beginning.
I feel like the best documentaries are always like a it takes a village approach. Like you've got to have everybody else kind of bring the right things to the table and the right connections and the right understanding of different aspects of it. So that's really cool to hear.
Yeah, yeah, and I don't learn from anybody that looks like me. So like my editing team, like,
Yeah.
there's a handful of them that like my main editor, her name's Amanda. Amanda's
Mhm.
not from the DMV, and she's not from the basketball space at all.
Okay.
So being able to filter these stories through her, if she doesn't understand it and we
Yeah.
can't explain it to her, it's not going to make the cut. So it's things like that that have really made this as good as it is.
That's I'm so glad you brought that up because I hadn't considered that aspect of it at all. But one, if you're not familiar with basketball, it has to be digestible for everybody, but also The DMV is a specific area and community, and if you don't know these places or these names, like there's a certain amount of background or context I'm sure you have to give for it to reach a wider audience.
Exactly, exactly. I want this to be a universal story. So
Yeah.
having universal people around me and people that are more knowledgeable in different aspects that I'm not familiar with, I need to be able to learn about those things and
Mhm.
they need to learn about, me and these stories and why it's important. And those conversations have absolutely shaped this. And that's ultimately how this became 3 episodes versus
Mhm.
the wider scope, because we had to just narrow down on the specificity and importance of every single word that makes it. Because if somebody's saying a slang word and
Sure.
Amanda doesn't understand it, like that
Yeah.
doesn't make the cut.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. Think I've hit on almost everything here. I definitely wanted to tease out. This is so great, and I think it's just such a cool project, and I really hope it jumps off. I don't know if we've got any listeners. Is anybody checking this out right now? Is from ESPN or somewhere cool? But I think this is the kind of content that people want. So I hope it gets to where you want to get it. Melanie, anything else about the documentary that we haven't talked about that you want to make sure people know and walk away from this interview kind of understanding about what you're trying to do?
Yeah, I mean, I think you asked some really good questions and we touched on some great points. But I just want to make sure that girls like me are seen and valued, especially in the women's basketball space. And just I hope that I'm able to inspire more girls like me to be able to take what they learned from this documentary and tell their own stories, and but also just know that they are worthy of having their stories be told. And that's the ultimate goal of Can't Retire from this. I want young girls to know what basketball can help them do on the court, but off the court, and the life skills that basketball can take them on this journey. Like that's my purpose.
I love that. That's so cool. When you could do something personally and professionally productive, but also it helps other people and inspires other people. I got to imagine that's a really great feeling. So got to make us a promise here that as this thing gets picked up and getting ready for a release, you'll come back on here and we can kind of promote where everybody can see it longer term. But in the shorter term here, we mentioned a screening next week. Is that available to the public? And if so, what's the information for that, and how could they get involved here?
Yeah, absolutely. Please come to our screening October 26th. It'll be at Creative Suitland Art Center. So go on www.creativesuitland.org, I want to say. I should have known that at the top of my head, but they have the Eventbrite link on there. You can also find it on Eventbrite. Can't Retire Doc on all socials. It's on our website as well, www.can'tretiredoc.com. It's a donation-based screening, so support, give $1. It helps cover the cost of the theater, and just, I want to just make this the best screening, because honestly, this is our 4th screening and I am a little tired.
I could imagine. Yeah, that there's a lot that goes into that too, I'm sure, pulling that together.
Yeah, but I hope the community comes out. We definitely want to sell this one out just as we've sold out other ones. So yeah, I'm very excited. I feel like this will be our best one yet.
That's awesome. Well, we'll try to blow it up on our end, and I'll make sure that I put the link to that screening in the episode description here. So anyone checking this out, you have easy access to that. I'm going to try to be there. That's the plan. So I hope everybody else will join us, and definitely looking forward to it. Melanie, thank you for doing this. Just as a DMV basketball fan, I think this is so cool, and I really appreciate I'm sure the hours and hours and hours and hours of hard work that have gone into this already. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. This is so fun.
Yeah, anytime. All right, everybody. You know the drill. Rate, review, subscribe, all that good stuff. We were presented by Betonline.ag. Again, the documentary is Can't Retire from This. Please come check it out, and hopefully we'll see you all there on the 26th.